All right. Hello, everyone. A very good evening to all of you. Welcome back to the UPSURGE webinar series, which is organized and conducted by the Student Circle of Economics and Decision Sciences, along with the Department of Economics and Decision Sciences in NSBM. I warmly welcome all of you to the Chapter 15 of UPSURGE webinar series. So before moving on to the topic for the day, I would like to make this an opportunity to introduce you all our guest speaker for the day. He is an independent non-executive director in a diverse portfolio of listed and unlisted companies, including multinational corporations. He is an alumni of PricewaterhouseCoopers and a fellow member of CA Sri Lanka as well as CIMA UK. He obtained his MBA from Cranfield School of Business, United Kingdom, and had a highly successful career in banking, both in the United Kingdom and Sri Lanka. During a 38-year career, he spent his last 16 years as CEO of 3 private sector licensed commercial banks in Sri Lanka and had the opportunity of contributing significantly towards policy advocacy issues such as corporate governance framework for banks, Basel III adoption and fair value accounting by banks, financial inclusion, and more recently, development of fintech sandbox framework for banks. During the above period, he chaired the Sri Lanka Banks Association, the Asian Banks Association, Sri Lanka Financial Services Bureau Limited, and also served on the boards of Lanka Clear as well as the Colombo Stock Exchange. He has been actively involved in the board of Sri Lanka's oldest business chamber, the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce, for over a decade, and as the only career banker to serve as its chairman for a 2-year tenure from 2017 to 2019. Having retired from full-time active management since September 2020, he continues to contribute towards business and economic renaissance of Sri Lanka by serving in a diverse pool of boards ranging from family-owned private companies, startups in payments and data analytics, a JV in operating a Tier 3 state-of-the-art data center, a listed conglomerate, and a multinational company with manufacturing interests in Sri Lanka, and a listed non-bank finance company. He continues to support policy advocacy issues of the CCC by chairing the National Agenda Committee on Entrepreneur Ecosystem. He is also a senior visiting fellow of the Pathfinder Foundation, a leading think tank in Sri Lanka. So we would warmly welcome our guest speaker for the day, Mr. Rajendra Tyagaraja, an independent non-executive director in a diverse portfolio of listed and unlisted companies for the Chapter 15 of UPSURGE. Welcome you, sir.
Thank you very much, Manila. Thank you for NSBM for inviting me. I think I have an issue. I think the organizers have to let my ability to get my video out. Okay, thank you. Okay, so thank you for the opportunity. What I'm going to do, I'm told that the request is for me to speak a bit about savings and investments in a moment of crisis.
Yes.
What I'll try and do is perhaps for the first 35 minutes or so, I will speak and then maybe open the floor for about another 20-25 minutes and try to make this as interactive as possible. I understand that the audience is predominantly the junior batch of NSBM, so year 1, perhaps year 2. So I'll try to keep it as interactive as possible. You know, before we get into the real gist of the conventional savings and investment theory and options, what I thought will be useful is to put some context to this crisis we all talk about, whether it's Aragalaya, whether it is whatever it is, the context of it, right? Which also I think might be useful for the undergraduates as part of your curriculum. You know, many people in public domain as well as professionals and economists keep on also pointing the finger of this crisis and saying that this is really due to the shortage of foreign exchange in this country. To me, I think I will very clearly say with objective evidence that the foreign exchange shortage is not really the cause of this crisis, but is actually the outcome of a couple of root causes. And the root causes, in my humble opinion, are twin. Two root causes which did not start in 2022, nor in 21, or in perhaps 2019 when this government came in. This is something which I think we as a nation have gradually built up over decades. And I would say most of us as citizens, regardless of the profession, vocation we have been practicing, have been a contributor to this cause. Effectively, to me, it is a case of us being an extravagant nation, spending more than what we have. Right? That is bottom line factor. And if you really look at the two fundamental causes of this, on one hand, you have a country which has been spending as a nation from affordable healthcare to education to defense to local government infrastructure, a whole range of expenditure, public sector expenditure beyond the amount of revenue it collects. And that is what you call a budget deficit, which is an annual plan. But I think as far as I'm aware, of the 74 years we have enjoyed independence since 1948, only 4 years out of that 74 have we managed to actually create a primary surplus. The balance 70 years, every year we have created a deficit in the primary account, and we have never met our targets. And as a result of that, nobody in authority has been held accountable for their actions. Despite around 5 or 6 years ago, most of you all who are in education may have learned about it. The government actually introduced something called a Fiscal Responsibility Act, a piece of legislation, which said that the deficit shall not exceed 8%. I think today we are probably more than 20% and nobody is questioning in Parliament. So we have failed, right? And that is something you and I, at least you guys, the next generation have to realize this. Whether as citizens we are going to allow that to continue. And if we don't do something about it, we are going to continue into a deeper hole. So that's point one. Secondly, we have also found an easy option over years on monetary policy, on monetary theory, by saying if we find that the revenue is not enough, we have a very interesting tool locally. It's called printing money. We have a machine, we can print money. And there, I'm not going to point the finger at any single individual or a group of individuals, but there appears to be some form of economic theory called the modern monetary theory, which appears to believe that there is no correlation between printing money and expanding an economy and inflation. There is a theory, but today, if you look at where we are today, on a conservative basis, I'm told that it is around 40%. But those of you who are connected to Google and to social media and who are following a guy called Steve Hanke out of John Hopkins, he comes, the last 6 months, he has been coming regularly on Sri Lanka. The latest number he has shown is 122%. and food inflation is 80%. So that itself shows that somewhere down the line, we have not followed an objective evidence-based policy framework in managing monetary expansion. Right? So we need to be really mindful of this. And if we don't get our grips to this, everything else becomes secondary. So with these two twin deficits, we also unfortunately had three very critical events which took place from 2019 to where we are today. First thing is, I'm not here to pass judgment on politics. It's a political comment, but I'm talking on facts. In November 2019, when the then government came into power, for whatever reason, good or bad, they saw it fit to readjust the taxation policy at that time, and they brought down a whole series of tax reliefs, including reducing the rate of corporate tax and personal tax. My own, I was paying, I think at that time, a marginal rate of 24%. I never grumbled. But then they brought it down to 18%. The withholding tax was, I think, 10% at that time. And then they brought it down to, I think, 5 or God knows what. I never asked for it. I never asked for it, right? But somebody gave this. And I think the impact of that in the next 2 years is around 800 billion rupees, right? And somebody obviously has to pay the price of that, point one. Secondly, along with that, a couple of things happened. Very unfortunately, the April 2019, their tax came. And that definitely put a back burner on tourism. Definitely put, and that's a key earner, because in 2018 we generated, I think, something close to almost, I think, $4 million at that. 4 billion came in that time, a major revenue earner, which literally went down to zero in the next 2 years. And then, of course, with that came the COVID. And in fairness, I don't think any government in the world, including Sri Lanka, ever estimated the impact of COVID on an economy, whether it is savings or investment. And in that process, till the second wave came, we were still twiddling the thumbs. And I think we are now only really, after almost 3 years, only now the economic impact of COVID is beginning to feel or be felt. Because for the first 2 years, very happily, rightly, there was what they call moratoriums. The regulator, central bank, came in and gave in various reliefs to the tourist industry, vehicle owners, small and medium term. Various people were given reliefs, basically saying your interest is capped, you don't have to repay your loan installments, we can defer it for a certain period. And then all, as some of us in policy predicted at that time, these moratoriums will come to an end at some time. And I think what we saw is literally all those moratoriums came to an end by December 2021, and the last one, which is on the vehicle leases for tourism industry, ended in June 2022. And now we are beginning to feel the pinch further with the gas queues, with the fuel queues, with the lack of fertilizer, God knows what, the pinch. And the chance are another set of moratoriums will be announced soon. Because these businesses, whether you are making a roast pang in a corner kade or a malu pang kade, or whether you are actually getting involved delivering pizza, or whether you are running a tourist minivan, or whether you are actually doing a medium scale business, the fact that essential ingredients for you to produce and or distribute your services, leave alone production. Let's look at those in the IT industry, right? When there is a power cut, whether it is 1 hour, 3 hours, or 10 hours, I presume most of you intelligent people are aware, one of the first things which drops is the quality of your data between the telecom towers. When there is prolonged power cut, your quality of data drops. So when you're doing online class, when you're doing an outsourcing function on IT, you get stalled. When that happens, people who engage you and who are paying you for your production gets tired of you and say, why am I working in Sri Lanka? Let's go to Chennai or let's go to Gurgaon, right? And that's happening today, right? So when this is happening, how can somebody actually touch their heart and say, I want to pay my loan, I am mindful of my responsibility, but physically I can't pay. And today we are got into that situation. So this is not only hitting one group of people, now it is hitting every segment of society, and we have to be mindful of that, the issue. And then, of course, the next unfortunate thing, and this is not again a political statement, it is a reality. Rightly or wrongly, somebody in their wisdom last year took a decision that Sri Lanka, as an agro-centric economy, should go 100% organic. We took a decision. Okay. That was taken. And somebody or whoever advised the people who took that decision may have had some thinking. But world over, when they took this decision to shut this by 100% in 1 year, world over the objective evidence was 3%. World over. And it takes sometimes 10, 20 years to get to 10%, leave alone 100%. And despite the various cries of professionals, agronomists, think tanks, and policy, the decision was taken. And what are we seeing now with this year's Maha and the second season? The expected yield has dropped below 50%. So we are now actually facing a potential food security crisis as well. So it's not a double whammy, it's actually a triple attack on 3 different dimensions, which is hitting Sri Lanka. Tourism, remittances coming back, value-added exports not being able to be supported, and then of course, one of the critical ingredients of our backbone of our economy, which is the agri economy. So we are actually being affected by all these. And this is affecting everyone of us, right? Whether we like it or don't like it. So we need to be very mindful as to what do we need to do. So before I really start on some of the tips as to what one can do, whether you are a student, whether you are a self-employed person, whether you are an employee or an entrepreneur, just sharing some of the challenges which you, me, your parents, your brothers and sisters, because you guys are studying, maybe others who are in your family, may be currently facing. The most important thing is, with the absence of fuel, unfortunately in Sri Lanka, we have an overbalance of privately owned vehicles in the road transport system. For some good reason, our public transit system has not caught up as much as we should have caught up. So there are too many people relying on tuk-tuks, vans, private cars, private vehicles on the public roads, the demands. And as a result of that, you're having an undue burden on fuel in terms of petrol and diesel, leave alone kerosene and gas. I'll come to that. Now, when the US dollar or world oil prices was $70 around 6 months ago at the beginning of this year, our monthly import projections of crude and refined oil was around $350 million when it was $70 to a barrel. It started creeping 70, mid 70s, 80s, 90s, 100s. And once it crossed 100, that same $350 million a month import bill has now gone to more than $550 million. Same quantity. And you and I, as citizens, have not reduced our demands. We are still waiting in the queue. Just to give you a perspective, my driver went out to, for those of you who know Colombo, the Borella Maradana Road petrol shed, he went at 5:30 last morning. And now it is 6:20 the next day. He's still there. Not washed his face. He's got a couple of malupangs for 2 meals, not washed, sweating it out, because he says he's now number 263 or 65. There are 1,300 token holders behind him. And he says if he gets out, there goes, right? So, okay. But this is me, because I have a family, I have reduced my transport, but still the fact is I still need, because the public, I'm not using the public transport as much as I should be using. I send this fellow, right? But saying that, I myself have now learned to moderate my unnecessary travel by working from home as much as possible, sharing rides. I have not yet got into biking because I'm a bit paranoid in central Colombo because of the way lorry drivers and guys come around you. It is still, I'm not quite comfortable with it. But there will come a time soon I'll probably get into a bike, right? It's austerity, it's domestic austerity. So that's one big challenge you have to understand. This is, you can't turn back and say, as a student or an employee or a government worker, it's not my problem. I can't go and treat somebody because I have no fuel. You give me my fuel. We have to moderate to reduce our consumption and reduce the burden on the state from their import bill. Point one. The second thing is, very sadly, we continue to say we are dependent very heavily on what we call fossil fuel-based energy. That is oil, hydro, and thermal. There is still a lack of appreciation of the value of renewable energy, whether it is solar. We are blessed with sunlight, we are blessed with wind, but we are still reluctant to allow the renewable energy supply to expand. When we are blessed as a nation with an ocean around us, some of the best wind patterns in South Asia, and sun to harness it. So this is something you guys have to also see. As citizens, are we allowing people to try and block this whole process when we are blessed with nature? So we have got to ask ourselves, because we are contributing to this, right? And then of course we speak about gas. Everyone wants to go and get that gas cylinder to cook. So I want to tell you something. I live in what place? Right next to UGC, where literally every day there used to be a strike, right? But if I look at my house, I am fortunate I have a garden. I have a Daralipa. I have never gone into a gas queue. I use a reverse, whatever that combustion cooker. But now I have told the domestics use Daralipa. Right? I can afford the gas, but I will not bribe somebody. I will not do something because I can't sustain it. So I will do what I can do, because as a kid, when I was a bit younger than you all, in the 70s, we didn't have gas. In our same house, we had a Daralipa. And every January for Thai Pongal, I go outside and boil my Pongal rice in a Daralipa. So I can't see any reason why I can't cook 3 meals in a Daralipa. So question is whether you guys also as citizens and youth are willing to recalibrate your expectations from the state and contribute towards the savings. It is something you have got to ask. Not about how much I can put in a fixed deposit, but what can you do to contribute to national savings? I think that's absolutely important. The other thing you may be facing, most of you may be facing, I have gone past it because both my girls have finished high school, they finished university, and they're working now. But if I look around me and see the number of females in the workforce where I sit as board members, I can see the challenges most of them have as a working mother, a parent, a child to elderly parents, in-laws, God knows what. How do you manage a family home? At the same time, try to make sure your boss doesn't understands your challenge and does not penalize you for lack of productivity at home if you're doing any working from home. The next thing is everybody doesn't have the luxury of 2 rooms or 3 rooms where you can lock yourself in one room like what I'm doing now and talking to you in a peaceful environment. Most people who have either 1 room or 2 rooms may have children screaming around, family moving around. So how do you actually do a proper online working from home or a hybrid thing? How can you do it, right? So there are challenges in your productivity, and one has to understand, are all employers understanding and empathizing with this? These are multiple challenges the gender is definitely having, which we have to understand. And of course, this is a point which I am going to keep on stressing for you guys. While all this is taking place, as a nation, when we are being challenged, amidst this challenge, there is an opportunity. The opportunity is when I look at your generation, and we look at people like NSBM. I think you guys are smart, you all are with it, and today I see 178 of you who have logged in today, right? So for the 178 means, Onela, how many are in your batch? In this batch, typically, how many do you have? I'm going to make this interactive now. Onela, Dinesha, one of you all can respond. How many of you all are in the total batch? Hello? Will someone respond? Okay. The fact that there are 180 of you logged in, which means that you probably have data connection, you have Wi-Fi, you have internet, and you probably have either a desktop, a mobile phone, a tablet, or an iPad, or a laptop, which means that you are, okay, someone just tells me, Hiranta, says that there are almost 700 in the new batch. So already we have 180 guys who have logged in here. Thanks, Hiranta. Which tells me that you guys are at a far better equipped to face the world than many of people who are outside there, because you are on data connectivity and you are able to connect and wire with the rest of the world, right? So the biggest advantage you guys have is the need and the ability, whether there are strikes, whether there is lack of transport, whatever happens, don't miss out on online learning, hybrid learning, interactive, also downloading from publicly available free data information so that you connect with the rest of the world and you equip yourself. The reason behind that is you can start while you're studying. You can even start to generate some earnings depending on what skills you have through online self-employment. There are sites like Upworks. I don't know how many of you all have heard of Upworks, where if you have simple skills like digital modeling, maybe some analytics, you can actually go out to the wide world and compete for jobs and get paid in dollars. There's nothing to stop you doing that now, right? So again, the resilience, now you are doing a particular degree in this new batch, but that doesn't stop you from getting additionally equipped either with an additional language or an additional skill like analytics, cybersecurity, with a business modeling, where those toolkits will help you to improve your employability and business entrepreneurship in anything you chose to do. So don't wait till you complete your studies to do this. I currently chair a higher education institute, a private sector degree awarding higher education institute for BCAS. I don't know how many of you all have heard of it. British College of Applied Studies. And when I talk to the young kids there, it's amazing the number of guys who are doing multiple degrees. A guy who is doing quantity surveying is also doing CIMA or ACCA. Somebody who is doing business is again doing ACCA or CIMA. Multi-skilling, right? Today the answer is multi-skilling. And very often, if you for some reason have chosen a social science or an arts qualification, there is nothing wrong with that. That is probably where your heart or passion is. But be ready to also reskill yourself and become employable. So that's important while you're a student. The relevance of employability in whatever you do. So saying that, let us now look at some of the things you can start doing. I'm not going to only look at this as a potential employee or an entrepreneur. I'm going to also start by sharing some tips for you as a student, as an individual, uh, young teenager or an adult as to what you can do. The first thing is cardinal rule is as much as possible, try to spend within what you have saved or earned. You know, we have the world's largest economy, the United States, which has been fueled for decades by one thing: consumerism, consumption, consumption, consumption. And these guys at one time were having inflation of 2-3%. But I don't know how many of you are aware that today, even the US is having inflation close to double digit. There are almost 9% inflation in the US. The UK has just exceeded 10% to the extent that Rishi Sunak, the Chancellor of the Exchequer in the UK, resigned last night along with Sajid Javid, the Health Secretary, because they could not defend their policies with Parliament and the voter base. So even mature economies like the UK and US are feeling the pinch of inflation, as well as a very important phenomenon, the challenge with Ukraine and Russia, which is affecting two things: the global energy supply chain, the need for gas and fuel, and secondly, the global food supply chain. Ukraine is one of the largest suppliers of wheat. So is Russia. Russia is now with sanctions from the US and the EU. So there are very few countries who will risk the risk of being blackballed by the US and go and trade with Russia. Similarly, in Ukraine, there are sanctions, but they have problems in getting their wheat out into the rest of the world. So we have problems there. Even Sri Lanka is facing the pain of those supply chains. So one needs to be very mindful that not only is this crisis with domestic economic challenges, we are also now engulfed with global challenges on food and energy, and that is expected to continue for the next at least 3 to 5 years. So as young graduates coming out into the employment or entrepreneurial world in the next few years, you guys have to learn to cope with this. And the most important thing there is to learn to build emotional resilience as equal to financial and other type of resilience. It's not only about saving rupees and cents and becoming financially strong, or studying and becoming intellectually strong. Very importantly, also not to allow number of these domestic and economic pressures affect your emotional framework. If you are not emotionally strong, the education and everything else becomes a factor of that. So that is absolutely important. And whatever I do today in mentoring, wherever I can mentor, I keep on focusing on building emotional resilience, right? So again, let's look at starting small. I need some guys to respond to one or two things. If you want to make this interesting, I need to make this interactive, right? So don't feel afraid or don't feel ashamed to raise your hands or raise your voice and respond to some of the questions I'm going to ask you. So let's look at forgetting opening savings of ₹1,000,000 or look at big ticket things as students. I'm going to ask you something very simple. Let's assume with whatever savings your money your parents have given or your Mahapala scholarship you have got or whatever support you get from your loved ones, that you are able to save ₹1 a day. Start with ₹1 a day, then increase it to ₹2 on the second day, ₹3 to the third day, ₹4 to the fourth day, go on like that, then you come to ₹6, ₹7 at the end of 7 days. So you start on Monday with ₹1 pocket from your savings and end up at ₹7 on a Saturday. Can someone tell me at the end of Saturday how many rupees would you have saved? I need your interaction here. ₹1 on Monday. Excellent. Manisha, ₹28 at the end of 1 week. Let's keep on repeating that every week for 52 weeks. 52 weeks, right? How much do you think you would have saved in 1 year? ₹28 a week, you keep on doing it. No burden, fairly easy. 1,456, almost $1,500. So many people might think this is nothing. I can't even go and have a meal outside with 3 people. But start small. It is discipline, right? Now, if you can do ₹1 a day up to 7 in a week, and then you repeat and doing that, let's assume your income level is a bit more affordable. You start with ₹10 a day, go on to 11, 12, 13, 14, and ₹16 at the end on Saturday. You then accumulate ₹81 instead of your ₹28. And if you keep on doing that for 1 year, you then save almost ₹4,200, right? Now, if you do this, start with $100. Let's assume you can afford to save $100 a day and end up at ₹107 on a Saturday. You do this repeatedly week in, week out. The chances are that you will end up with ₹37,492. That is almost ₹38,000. That is not a small amount in case you get into some emergency difficulty. You don't have to use your credit card. You don't have to go and borrow from somebody. Now, the reason I'm saying this is I'm going to give you some objective evidence. You can Google this. There is a new generation bank in the UK called Monzo, Monzo. Both my daughters use. They don't use the conventional, the Hatton National Bank, Commercial Bank, Bank for Ceylon type banks in the UK. They live and work in the UK. They use Monzo, the smart bank, no branches, app-based. It's all there, right? Now, I'm saying this because my girls have done this. Now, Monzo in 2021, when the UK was going through COVID and lockdown, they have done a sample from 28,000 of their small time savers. Guys who were saving £1 a day, £1 a day, 1, 2, 3, 4, who were able to build up around £630 a year. 28,000 savers were able to save around £18 million in that year. And as a result of that, literally 100% of that 28,000 guys, for the first time, became debt-free. They used that savings for a rainy day instead of having to go to a credit card or borrow from somebody. Small things, but it made a difference, right? And that is based on objective evidence, right? So it's something I want to say. It is never too small to start saving. Don't think I have to wait till I qualify. I have to wait till my first check of 50,000 rupees to come to do this. Start even with ₹1 a day. Also, there is something very fun you can do. I don't know how many of you guys exercise. I don't know how many of you guys use smart apps like Strava or Fitbit to track your exercise. You know, one fun thing you can do, every kilometer you cycle in a day or every kilometer you walk, put aside $1 or $10. That's a personal challenge you set. Put something aside. So it is like you work for saving and start to build up. You can even, for those of you who have a small savings account in a bank, you can even have building a standing order every time you do that reset goal to have an auto move from your savings account or a current account into a separate account and start to build that little chest for a rainy day. So it's something I think you need to be able to look at. And why I'm saying this, guys, is you guys are intellectual guys. You are all qualified and got into a university. 25 years ago when I ran Hatton National Bank, I used to, I don't know how many of you have heard of this thing called Gami Pubudua. It was to do with the village awakening scheme for microfinance. And we used to also finance plantation workers. Mainly, it was a women-led thing where the tea plucker is a woman, the guy sits there and smokes a cigarette or does something there. Nothing disrespectful to the guys. And every week the ladies get paid in cash, but if they take it home, very often the husband takes it and goes to buy a bottle and they don't go to save. And I can tell you those days when we used to have a village banking savings unit, the mobile banker used to go to the plantations, and these ladies, when they collect their salary packet cash, they don't even go to bank. Before they go to their line house home, they catch hold of the bank, the mobile banker, the Banku Mahatya, and give, whether it's 5 rupees or 50 rupees or 100 rupees, and say Mahatya Tyaganda, the account ticket, because Gedar Mahatya guy. So, if they could do it at literally semi-literal level, you guys are sophisticated emotionally and intellectually. You can do much better. So don't be disheartened. The second thing is, very importantly, in a moment of crisis, whether you are a bank, whether you are a finance company, whatever company, is going to all look at how much they can lend, whom to lend, for what purpose do they lend. Before they lend, they have to manage their own assets and liabilities. So as a result of that, if you are relying on banks funding or a non-bank institutions funding, what was in good times where they came chasing after you now might dry up. So it's very important that you first learn to be liquid as much as possible before you put on investments which are illiquid and more longer term. For me, as a policy now, as much as possible, I put my deposits on 3 months and not on 1 year, because I don't know how to predict the next year, frankly. So even if the rate is slightly less, I prefer to put it on short term. Just a thought, right? Because you need to balance the availability of liquidity and the reliability and balance that against return on the investment in this moment. The next thing is also to see, is it only bank deposits or government securities? People ask about government security. During good times, government of Sri Lanka bonds or treasury bills, it was never a question. The government will meet, there's no issue. And I'm saying this in responsibility. I'm still not saying that it is not good, it is good, but remember that we have now got into a default situation. Effectively, we have got into our national credit worthiness has become selective default. So again, till this restructuring comes out, till we know very clearly, are they only going to restructure the external debt, the foreign currency debt of the country, till we have better clarity. In my opinion, it's always good if you are putting money on treasury bills or government bonds as an investment, again to look at the shorter time frame till we get more clarity. Because more information we get, it will help us to make a better understanding. People talk about the share market. Even during the COVID, a lot of people made money. But frankly, I tend to keep away from the share market because while I have been on 40 years in banking, maybe my fault was I was always spending time looking after other people's money and didn't have enough time to look after my money in terms of following the share market. For me, two things have made sense in this country. As an island surrounded by water, I have always believed in real estate because with the island, limited amount of land for expansion, which means always the demand for land will be more than supply. It has made sense to me for long-term investments, and I have not gone wrong. Secondly, I believe in the banking system, and I believe in bank deposits, and it has made sense to me. I'm not passing judgment on people who have gone into the stock market. Many people have made a lot of money. But if you guys are looking at it, unless you have the time and the skill to understand how the market works, point one. And secondly, whatever you put in there, as much as possible, don't borrow and put from your savings, but not the savings which you need for a rainy day, not for the savings which you may need for emergency health or to finance higher education or to finance an emergency operation or surgery of your parents or somebody. Don't go and put that. Whatever you put there, put something which you can afford in case it becomes a problem to wait for a longer time to realize it, or if it goes sour, to be able to take the risk. Don't put your essential service. It's absolutely important. Gold. Gold is frankly a very good investment, literally not only in Sri Lanka. Most of South Asian culture is gold is a very important substitute for rupees. How has Sri Lanka functioned for years, decades? Gold has been an interesting means of savings. It has its ups and downs, but you need to be able to take a medium-term view. If I look at the gold sovereign and see how the 24 karat sovereign has moved in the last 7 months, an ounce, which was on January 3rd, 11,770 rupees. On the 5th of July, went up to 20,930 rupees. So it's a 77% growth in 7 months. So you might think, I missed the boat. Question is, if you decide to put your money in gold, it depends on which time you get in, whether you get in when it was a low point or you get in now. If you are getting in now, you need to be very clear and be advised. Are you taking the view it's going to go from 70 to 100,000 or 200,000? If you're not sure of that, you need to rethink and see, am I trying to get in too late in the game? On the other hand, if you are about to get married in the next couple of years, or you have a sibling who may be getting married in the next few years, whether you invested in January or you invest now, the chances are that if you hold it for the next couple of years, it's going to go up more. For example, when my daughter got married last December, the sovereign was, I think, around 87,000 rupees. Now it's about 180,000. There's never a good time. So you, depending on the purpose of the saving, you can take a decision. That's your call. The other point I just want to, because we're running out of time, I just want to bring many people, especially your age group, will talk about crypto. Bitcoin is crypto. Everyone is talking, I'm sure in your group, even your NSBM must be talking about it. There must be, I don't know whether you have classroom tutorials also on this. Effectively, there is nothing which can prevent you from investing in crypto outside. Is it legal? Central bank will say no, because there isn't a legal regulatory framework. But I'm sure there are many people in Sri Lanka who have gone and invested in various types of cryptocurrencies outside. The view I have in that is I'm neutral as long as if you are doing it, you know what you're doing, and again, don't put something which you need for a rainy day into that asset. If you can afford to part of your savings which is not needed for a rainy day and you want to take a risk, as long as you have studied that, you can, that's your call. But do not put, I personally will not do it because I don't understand. So I'm happy for my neighbor and my friend and my children's friends, but I believe in not touching what I don't understand. So that's again a bit of advice I will give you all. So I think those are some of the broad practical tips I would give for anyone, whether you're a student or an entrepreneur or an employee in today's context, and also austerity savings. You see, every one of you must now start to have a budget. It's not only an academic exercise, it's not only the government's role personally. You need to see when you're in NSPM, what is your weekly expenditure? How much you need for transport? How much you need for SMS? How much you need for Spotify? How much you need for data, for eating and clothing? And once you budget that, from where are you going to fund it? How much are your parents able to afford? Are you entitled for a scholarship? How much are you getting? And are you spending more than what you're able is something you have got to find out. And I'm sure no two of you will have the same personal circumstances. So you need to be able to do an individual personal budget, not an academic exercise, but a real-time exercise, and then learn to manage with what you have. And I'll tell you, having worked for 40 plus years with the pension, and I'm still getting very healthy board fees, I can afford to spend 30,000-40,000 rupees from Food City or John Fields. But I don't do it now. I used to every morning have a orange as a fresh juice. But now at 200 rupees imported orange, I will not touch. I get it down from Tisamaharama at 20 or 30 bucks, the green one, and the Nara. That's my personal choice. I don't buy butter anymore, right? I avoid butter because to me it's not essential. So even for you, I think you need to have a personal plan as to how do you manage your austerity, leave alone. Only when collectively as citizens, every one of us have a internal savings program about learning to spend within what you have, will a nation as a whole will learn to also become savings oriented. So with those thoughts, I'm going to now open this for questions, and I already see one question from Nwanti. With your permission, I think Dinesha or Onela, the moderator, can I take on the questions as they come on chat? Are you all okay with that?
Sure.
Thanks. So Nwanti is asking, what's my final thoughts on the dollar crisis on Sri Lanka? So you see, to me, the dollar crisis, as I told you early part, is nothing but man-made. And to me, what man makes or man creates, man can also unravel. So my answer is I'm very positive as a son of the soil. I believe that Sri Lanka has a solution. We will come out of it. I think Aragale has taught us about the citizens have also woken up. We are asking for change. We want corruption to get out of the equation. But this answer is not going to come in 3 months. In my humble opinion, we did the right thing. I'm very supportive of the fact that we went to the IMF because that is a world organization. They have dealt with dozens of countries which have got into this situation. And this is the first time we have got in since independence. Argentina has, I think, got into this situation more than 10 times. And recently they raised $100 billion through an IMF program. Leave alone first time to raise 3-4 billion. So I think the IMF program is a very good opportunity for us as a nation to see where we have gone wrong, what are the policy reforms we have to do, and to support the policy reforms. What are the sacrifices you and I as citizens have to do? That will come as domestic austerity. We have to learn to tighten our belts. That will come. So once that's why when this goes to Parliament, this debt sustainability program which the Prime Minister is talking about has to be approved by Parliament on this side from an affordability point of view, and it has to be accepted by the outside creditors and the IMF. So at this moment in time, the technical deliberations have finished last Friday, but for the next 4 or 6 weeks, I think you will see the expectation gap between the creditor groups and the IMF, which probably is on this side, and what we think we can do, there is a gap. So the deliberations will start to take place to bring that gap as close as possible. You will never get a perfect fit, as close as possible. And when we have that arrangement, they will go to the executive board in Washington, and we will have to go through cabinet to Parliament to get this approved. And in my understanding, because it's a fragile government, it's unlike several years ago, you had a clear mandate. At this time, if we are to get in, this is, I think, the 14th or 15th time we are going into an IMF program. Whatever program we do must be deliberated not just by the finance minister. It has to be deliberated by all 225 people in Parliament, member representatives, and there has to be a unanimous consensus to follow that program in the next 5 to 7 years, regardless of who is in power. Because if somebody comes in 2 years and changes, we have lost it. So this is something you guys as students and citizens need to be behind. That's my thought process. In summary, yes, I'm optimistic we will come out of it, but not in 3 months, not in 6 months. It's probably a 5 to 7 year horizon with a lot of belt tightening. We will definitely come out. I'm pretty convinced of that. In 2 years' time, where do I see Sri Lanka? I think in 2 years' time, we will still be on a situation of restructured debt. Hopefully, we would have seen more inbound tourism coming in. Definitely, that will help more in terms of the foreign currency flow. For the right or wrong reasons, we are going to see more and more people going outside abroad. You see, when people went outside on 3-year, 5-year contracts to the Middle East or Singapore, that brought in money back into the country. That was where at one time we were having almost $6 billion here in inward remittance, which helped to manage a lot of the import-export imbalance. But now the dangerous trend which is happening is we are not only seeing people going on short-term contracts to the Middle East, we are seeing a rising trend in permanent migration. And not only older people, even young people. Frustration, lack of hope, that is happening. And it's an inevitable thing when crisis comes in. And so that is another challenge we have to be mindful, because more you go on a permanent basis, the reason to send back is less than if you went as a single person to the Middle East and your family is back here, you will send something back. So that's something we have to understand. Will the dollar appreciate or depreciate in the future? I think the steep depreciation which we saw in the last 6 to 9 months has probably stabilized a bit, and no longer are we defending it aggressively with foreign reserves because we don't have foreign reserves. So in a way, I think what that is happening is helping us to learn to manage our foreign currency outflow very carefully with what we have. So hopefully in the next few months, while this restructuring program takes place, in my opinion, the further depreciation, I think will be less pronounced than the last 6 to 9 months. But whether it will appreciate, we may see a little appreciation, but to really see a significant appreciation coming back from 360 rupees to the 300s or below that, you probably need 1 to 2 years to see how systematically are we able to bring in our exports closer to imports, as well as the tourism, those two, and the IT revenue to really play a meaningful role to really see that. So I don't see the serious appreciation for probably another 2 years. Dushman sir, will the entire private company sector fall in few months under the economic conditions? So I don't think any sector in the private industry can escape this, because if you don't have gas, if you don't have workers coming to work or being productive, if you don't have the government machinery open, if you don't have railways functioning, movement of goods and services, if you do not have lorries to move supply chain, definitely there is going to be an impact. But I think it will be different. The ones who are more agile, who are able to change their business models and focus on managing their capital expenditure, to do what they need to do to be preserve their balance sheets rather than expand in a challenging environment. But the challenge is not to really expand, but to preserve what you have. That will differentiate the strong and the weak. The other important thing is most of the businesses, whether you are in exports or domestic production or services, you will depend on a value chain, and you are only strong as your value chain. So this is a lesson for the stronger companies, whether you are in exports or listed conglomerates or the big companies. Don't say, I will screw my small-time supplier. I can now delay the payments and make them to give because they are weak now, to give it at a cheaper price. No. The moment you do that, their sustainability becomes a question. And if they fall, you fall because your supply source will fall. So for the smarter big companies, this is the opportunity to reach out to your smaller supplier base, hold their hands and say, you will have a problem. Interest rates are more than 20%. Don't go to the bank. We will give advance payments. We have a relationship. You keep on supplying. So you strengthen your supply chain at this time. So this is the opportunity for the supply chain, for the weak and the strong to get closer. Foreign investments, will it increase in the future with the crisis in Sri Lanka? So I have two opinions on that. The whole issue of foreign investment is a factor of what we call ease of doing business, right? We are still way, way below world markets. You see, this investment is not coming because somebody likes your face or somebody likes our leadership faces. Geopolitical elements will be there to some extent, but geopolitical FDI is not a sustainable thing. What I call sustainable FDI is something which is based on the country's competitive landscape, where you can attract somebody who wants to invest in your country better than what your neighbor can do or anybody else. For that, as a country, we need to benchmark what we are doing from the labor forces, the skill reskilling, the labor laws about the ability to hire and fire if people don't perform for productivity, productivity enhancement, ease of doing business, the legal framework, various things. There are various indicators. We have to benchmark and see where are we in relation to our 10 next competitors, because investors have a choice, not because they love you and me. And we have to demonstrate a progress in the mix of those indicators, KPIs, to a level where somebody will say, I will come to you. This whole story about giving 40-year tax breaks and 10-year tax breaks, the people, serious investors are not attracted by zero tax. Why do you think Singapore is one of the strongest FDI attracting countries in the country? They don't have a zero tax. Their typical corporate tax is 17%. But why are people going there? Because of the ease of doing business and the confidence they have in the system. So a very important thing is for the government, regardless of that, the opposition also, not to hammer the government, to understand as a country we have some indicators which we have to improve, and together to work towards those indicators. And this, you guys, you all are also one critical element in the indicator. What is that indicator? Productivity of the workforce and employment-centric education. There is no point in producing 80,000 or 100,000 arts graduates and then ask for a government job or a pension job. You have to become employable, used on the degree or the vocational skill you choose. Absolutely important. How to decrease inflation in Sri Lanka? Look, world over, there are two things. Why is the inflation happening? Because you have on one side, there is a demand for something, and on the other side, there is a supply. So very often, when the demand exceeds supply, prices go up. So there are two ways of doing it. Either you reduce the demand and you bring down the prices, or you increase the supply and make the supply to match the demand. Now, as policymakers, typically central banks are very good at the ability to manage monetary policy by managing demand. Supply side is very much a factor of government policy and how the capacity of the economy is able to rise with minimal additional borrowing. So I still feel that we can grow the economy, but in a world over, I think there has been objective evidence to say that when there is a crisis on hyperinflation or high inflation, one of the first signs is you get to see a deceleration of the economy for a short period, where demand then reduces and then it starts to go up. That has been the objective evidence world over. So it is possible, but I think we need to be able to go through that process. Anugi, is it good to save money in financial institutions? Are there any disadvantages? So I'm a firm believer, having been in the formal system for almost 40 years. I'm a firm believer in Sri Lanka, the central bank. I have faith in the central bank. I have faith that the ability to supervise licensed, regulated institutions, there is a basic framework. I mean, each institution will have a different balance sheet and profits. But when you invest, don't worry about the profits. Look at the soundness of the balance sheet, right? That's important. And in my opinion, when there's a market. So you have 30 odd banks and you have maybe a larger number of finance companies, all licensed. You need to have a central bank publishes the rates every day, or you can get it on Google. You need to have an idea in what rates are these institutions offering you rates. And if somebody is offering you 5-10% more than what the average industry is offering, ask yourself why. If you recall, about 5-6 years ago, there was a major collapse. I will not mention the name. It was a household name in banking, finance, education, property. It was a household name. And when banks are offering 10, 12, 14% interest, they were offering 22, 23%. My question was, did people ask why and how are those people giving those rates? And how are they going to make money out of that? And it eventually became like a Ponzi scheme, rolling over, rolling over, rolling over, and it collapsed like a pack of cards. So you need to be smart, but I think one good thing is if you are looking into a regulated financial institute, the central bank from time to time sends public information about these are the formal listed institutions where you can invest. Now, even I think 2 days ago in the press, they put out a name of a particular unlicensed institution saying these people are claiming to accept deposits, but they are not regulated. So those are the things you need to be wary and not go around. There is a question, local manufacturers who import raw materials from foreign countries, this situation has become a major negative hit. How can the government be supportive of this situation? See, the medium-term answer is import substitution, but you're not going to be able to do that locally because our track record of innovation has been unfortunately slower than some of our regional competitors. We have depended too much on import. So now suddenly to change, it will take time. It will take time. You will need to do more R&D. You have to work more with universities and find out alternate materials. Even if there are materials, we have to patent them. We have to test them, test the application for a particular industry. So that's going to take time. But this is the opportunity to start and accelerate that process so that in 5 to 10 years time, the dependency on pure import will become less. But the answer for the next year or two, the short term, my friend, is how can the government support? The only way the government can support is to curb non-essential imports and try to manage and support the essential imports for the country, which are for contributing towards productivity rather than non-essential spending. That's where your motor vehicle is not important, or your BMW is not important. But I think an additional bus is important. Orange or cheddar cheese is not important. But if we are not able to produce enough local milk, maybe milk powder or wheat is important. So pharmaceuticals are important. So I think the essential things are important, right? Nitu, some tweets mention that Sri Lanka needs to embrace the currency board. So there are various, Dr. Vijayavardhan has his own theory. There are various people who have spoken about currency boards. My limited knowledge in this part of the world, the only country who took a view on this during the 1997-98 East Asian crisis was Malaysia. Mahathir at that time, he went against the IMF and he said, I am going to take the world on and I am going my own way. The only question was when Mahathir did that, Malaysia, from an economic point of view, was at a different level of economic stability than where we are today. So in a moment of selective default and acute crisis, is that the answer? I personally do not think so at this moment in time. I hope that addresses so far the questions which have come on chat. I would like to take any questions which are going to be done verbally. If anybody has anything verbally, I'm quite happy to take them.
All right, so I assume there are no more questions from the audience.
You know what I'm impressed, and I appreciate is we started at 6 o'clock with 180 people, and I can see on chat we still have 142. So obviously I must have done something which hasn't chased the 140 away. So I think I can do some justice to myself. invest
Yes,
in this
the
1 hour
session
and
was
50
very
minutes.
informative. Thank you so much. So, do we have any more questions? All right. So,
Disadi is saying, how long will it take for Sri Lanka to recover from this crisis? I thought I had given alluded to that. To me, coming out with a clear national strategy and communicating that to the ordinary citizen will probably take another, now we are in July, probably another 6 months, probably by year end, because that has to fall in line with the IMF program, the extended funding facility, and a commitment for at least 3 to 4 years under the EFF. And by that time, we would probably have some clarity on how the bilateral creditors, the foreign creditors, as well as the sovereign bond holders react to the negotiations with the two legal and financial advisors, Lazards and Clifford Chance, with the central bank and the treasury. So in my opinion, it will take about 6 months, but by that time, hopefully, there will be a transparent national economic revival plan, which hopefully will be endorsed by Parliament, which will be made public information to you and me as ordinary citizens. And I think once we get that perspective and we know that we are on the right track, in my opinion, it will probably be a 5-year horizon. If you really want to say, breathe clearly and say, no, now we are coming out of it, it will take about 5 years. There is one question from Binadi. In an economic crisis, is it advantageous for private sector business to try to expand, or should they hang with or without expanding? So again, Binadi, the key crucial thing here is two things. Where are you as a business today in terms of your balance sheet? To what extent are you leveraged? If you're unleveraged and if you're in cash, on cash, you have the bandwidth to expand more than somebody who is leveraged. If you are leveraged, my advice is at 20%. We were on single digit interest rates 12 to 18 months ago. The cost of that is now only going to start to really bite. So I think the priority has to be conserve the balance sheet and whatever limited liquidity you have, and preserve your business model rather than trying to grow if you are leveraged. But if you have cash and you have agility and you have a stable workforce and you are productive and you have a USP in your product range which can compete ideally outside the world, with outside world, go for it. And in that, I would say your ICT business. For example, in my retirement, I chair a couple of businesses, companies, listed companies, but I also chair an unlisted company, a fintech company, which is involved in AI and analytics. Now that business currently is growing, it's expanding. Why is that? Because the customer base and the revenue, almost 90% is coming from outside. So I'm actually having a rupee cost base and generating non-rupee revenue. So I can afford to expand because I am not exposing myself to foreign currency risk. And secondly, if I need to, I can manage to defend my payroll by adjusting for this current challenge with maybe even a semi-dollar based link hike as a compensation to retain my staff. And worst comes to worst, if I really have a problem, I can outsource from the region because all you need is 4G and a laptop or a tab to code or program. So I think that business gives a lot of agility, quite different from, say, processing fresh mangoes or aloe vera or do something which will be a different set of challenge. So each business has to look at liquidity, leverage, the resilience, and the product mix to see how competitive is the offering waste pen. So I hope that gives you some perspective. No single paintbrush across the entire house.
All right, so with that, I think we could cover a lot of things under this topic of savings and investments during the current economic crisis from the chapter 15 of UPSURGE webinar series. So I would like to make this an opportunity to thank Mr. Rajendra Tyagaraja, an independent non-executive director in a diverse portfolio of listed and unlisted companies for sharing these important insights with us. And I would like to thank all of you who joined with us today to share this knowledgeable experience with us. And we're planning to meet you all soon with another informative session of UPSURGE. So till then, stay safe and take care. I'm Monel Budurike signing off as your moderator for the day. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much and have a good evening.